Neon lights, text that I can't read, people with surgically implanted cybernetics with a rough attitude and a high likelihood to put a gun to your head, all the while corpse eye gouge the living. This is starting to sound like a cyberpunk setting. Cyberpunk in sci-fi has often been used as a set piece for dystopian fiction. Historically, it made its foundations in novels like Neuromancer, Snow Crash, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, as well as other works of fiction released throughout the 20th century. Now, while there were other works that could be credited as the originator, Neuromancer helped build a solid identity that separated its vision of sci-fi from the rest. Fast forward to now, and yeah, there is more cyberpunk than ever before. In fact, we literally have a cyberpunk game in the name, 2077, which by the way is one of my favorite open world games of all time, and was something that I always wanted ever since playing Deus Ex Human Revolution. It's become a popular aesthetic that has seen some success and has even spawned some iconic pieces of media that we can still picture to this day. Well, I have another piece of cyberpunk for all of you to revel in, because not only is it a gorgeous piece of cyberpunk, but it is also a fantastic shooter that will make you wish that there was more of it. I present to you Cyber Doom. No, oops, that's not right. Doomlink. I got it. Deadlink. Deadlink is a product that came about a few years after the storm that Doom Eternal created. Its success and polish helped push the popularity and desire for what some people call movement shooters, with lots of verticality and speed intertwining in refined and satisfying combat. Deadlink is part of that new wave of single-player first-person shooters, while also adding a roguelite spin into the mix. Another popular genre that people still can't seem to get enough of, even though we're being flooded with them every year like it's the day after tomorrow. However, the fusion of FPS and roguelite would actually be a combination that worked out insanely well, and Deadlink was the first game that I discovered at the time that made it a pair made in heaven. If you go on Steam and add the tags roguelite and FPS, you will then find a sea of them that share similar commonalities, all the while doing their own spins on the two formulas. So far, Deadlink is one of my absolute favorites. It's also become one of my favorite shooters in recent memory, where I would even be willing to pair the game with the likes of Doom Eternal and Ultrakill when it comes to the joy seen in the core gameplay, that is. It's fast, very vertical, incredibly snappy, all the while just looking drop-dead gorgeous in terms of its art style, An Unreal Engine game that doesn't look like another photorealistic tech demo, but one that employs a number of interesting rendering, shading, and compositing techniques used to fully realize the game's unique art style. I'll put a link in the description of a video regarding the development of the game's stylized 3D look if anyone is interested. It's definitely worth a watch, especially for aspiring 3D artists and modelers. Anyway, Deadlink, the bastard child of Cyberpunk 2077 and Doom Eternal with a roguelite attitude, will give you challenge, verticality, fluid swapping between weapons and abilities, and a burning desire to go for another run after things go wrong. And so with that, let's dive a little bit deeper into this colourful corner of this rundown sci-fi city, shall we? Deadlink's story revolves around you being an operator of sorts. You never actually see the character you're playing as, but what is apparent is that you are being used in an operation to overthrow a corporation called Femto, and in order to execute this grand plan, the group that you are working for are running simulations under an experimental project that enables the user to control a combat shell. Your point of view is then connected remotely to these combat shells, but the shells that you play as are merely vessels for the user's will, so to speak. Using the Deadlink interface, the player can then control each of the 4 combat shells that you can play as. When you first start the game, you'll only have the first shell to play as, called Soldier, who comes equipped with a shotgun and a rocket launcher. Each class will have their own unique primary weapon and starting secondary weapon, on top of the grenades and the 2 unique abilities that they each have. The loop of the combat in this game boils down to entering an area where enemies spawn. You then use a combination of your weapons to do damage, grenades, and abilities to either damage, disrupt, stun, or use to close distance with, all the while keeping your shield and your health so that you don't die and have to start all over again. Like with roguelites, the first time playing will be rough because you are generally expected to die at some point due to being, well, under-equipped and not knowing what's coming ahead, as well as not having everything available to you. The process of dying will then allow you to get access to more resources and upgrades further down the track to make future runs easier. In roguelites, you sometimes have to die in order to progress through the story, and Deadlink is no exception in that case. I've had some runs where I've reached the final level only to screw up, lose all of my shields, watch my health get deleted, and continue to watch in disappointment as the screen returns me to the hub menu. There are 4 levels in total, and each level, generally speaking, has the same approach to progressing. You clear an area, you get options to go for an upgrade. Sometimes it'll be credits for more currency to spend at the shop, sometimes it'll be tokens, which you can use to upgrade permanent stats or specific shells, or perhaps you want to get a weapon mod or a heavy weapon mod, or upgrades for your shells, or newer upgrades for that matter. You have options every time you complete an area. Now, on the topic of heavy weapons, you can actually change them once you have an opportunity to do so. So for example, if you're not liking a particular heavy weapon that you have, when you have the option to change heavy weapons after clearing an area, you can then switch it when you have the chance. Either that, or you can just simply upgrade the heavy weapon that you have, which will make it more useful down the track. And if you don't like it and you decide to be stuck with it, then you'll just have to learn how to handle it on top of your other abilities, as well as using your other weapon. The combat is incredibly frantic and chaotic in this game, and is designed in such a way where you'll always be engaging with all of the bells and whistles that your current shell has. In fact, with the way the game's implants work, which are like modules for your shells as you go through the, progression of the run, so to speak, they operate on 2 factors. One is that they only activate depending on where you placed it. So if you picked an implant that gives you more movement speed for X amount of seconds and you place it in the bracket for weapon swaps, then it would only activate when you swap weapons. This principle also applies to the other sections where they only activate under specific circumstances. So if you want to use all of your implants, you'll then have to be conscious of the abilities that you have and how to activate them while in combat. The second factor is the battery level for the implants. Some modules will only work if they're given enough power, if they're put in the right slot. So if you place a 3-bar implant in a slot that can only support 1 bar of power, then you'll only benefit from its passive traits if it has any. For action benefits, you'll need to put that 3-bar module in a 3-bar slot. This system in place helps you connect your entire arsenal where it is always being used no matter what you do. you will inevitably have to use your abilities in order to fend off the enemies and bosses anyways that can nuke your shields and health if you decide to pick favorites. Come to think of it, it's not too far apart from the way Doom Eternal handles its core gameplay, where the game actively encourages and rewards the player that uses their entire arsenal effectively, as well as their equipment usage, as well as their other abilities, rather than just sticking to a select few weapons like you would in, say, Doom 2016, where the player doesn't have to use absolutely everything. Whereas in Doom Eternal, it is vital that you take advantage of every resource and every tool at your disposal, where you then have the highest chance of success, especially on an Ultra Nightmare run. Well, in Deadlink, you're constantly using your primary, your heavy weapon, your grenades, and the abilities. Around the arena, you'll also have environmental hazards that you can also trigger for decent damage, ammo pickups to pick up, temporary armor for quick relief. All of these things that combine in the arena also lead to you constantly moving and utilizing everything, which just makes for constant engagement, something that isn't always seen in other first-person shooters, and I love how the game does it in its own way without really ever telling me that I need to do those things. It just comes instinctively, you know? Also, in the arena, you'll find these things called sea balls. Sea balls are placed in every combat area, and you will need to rotate between fighting the enemies and using sea balls to replenish secondary ammo for your heavy weapon. Now, while there are some pickups in the arena, the sea balls will ultimately be your primary source so that you can continue using your heavy weapon on top of using your implants or modules. When you tally up all of the combat components that mend together, it shows a combat system that is fast, dynamic, fluid, and constantly engaging, again, like I said, in a way that you do not see in other shooters. Even on the game's starting difficulty, you'll still be forced to approach each area like a planned assault, because the one life still applies here. When you die, it's back to the drawing board. And in the context of the game's story, it makes sense to die once, because you are essentially testing out the combat shell's effectiveness in a simulation. Naturally, when you run a simulation of any kind with the goal of success in mind, a mistake or a failure in the simulation generally leads to a reset. So when you die, you are resetting the simulation to then have another go at it all over again. All this means is that all of the enemies and the bosses that you're fighting are simulated, whereas the ones that you will be fighting are still out there. The game is just one big gauntlet of trial runs before you are sent out to deal with the real version, so to speak. But as far as I know, you will just be doing the simulations, and each run will always yield something out of it. What usually separates roguelites from roguelike games is the factor of progression. In traditional roguelikes, you generally only take the experience with you, and by that I mean what you've learned during your run. Beyond that, you get nothing. But in roguelites, there is always a degree of progression even when you fail. That's set up so that you may have an easier time in the next run. And to get the full experience of Deadlink, you'll have to be willing to accept the fact that not every run is going to be a win. However, even when I did die, I looked forward to the next run because the rewards that I gained will help me out. And on top of that, I'm seeing more of what the game has to offer, on top of the knowledge that I've gained from that level and learning more of the bosses, mechanics, and what to look out for in the future. All of this together assisting me in my next effort to, well, eventually conquer the game. Also, the game is actually quite short since there are really only 4 levels, and if you get good enough, you'll eventually be able to beat the game in one sitting. So far, I've managed to beat the game twice with the Hunter and Engineer shells. I have yet to do it with Soldier and the Juggernaut, but it's only a matter of time, after some serious grinding and stubbornness that is, where I will eventually get those runs completed. Speaking of the shells, they are all pretty fun to use. They each have their own set of abilities and weapons, as well as starting health and shields and movement speed. Soldier is the class you use to get your feet wet. It can be aggressive and can also dart across the arena thanks to the grappling hook ability. It can also stun enemies with his EMP ability, and if you can get a cluster together, that's like multiple shield drops that you can get at once after killing the enemies. which you will need on the higher difficulties. Hunter is more of your damage dealing class that prefers keeping their distance and picking specific targets, as well as causing misdirection thanks to the holographic ability. And you can also switch places with a target while marking them, and marking them is how you can get shield drops. This is a pretty fun class to play with, and would even say that it's one of the easier classes to play because the abilities that you have can generally take the heat off of you when you really need it. You'll unlock him naturally just by doing runs, and it's fairly early on that you get him. With Engineer, it's more about smart positioning and crowd control. With the Wormlink ability, you can hold enemies, dish out damage, and with the use of implants and other means, can also cause chain reactions or explosions with other surrounding enemies. You can also target C-balls with this ability too, so definitely make use of it. Then there's the turret, which is good for giving you breathing room while you use your weapons to attack from range. With Engineer though, you have to actually go out of your way to find the shell yourself. You don't just unlock him naturally while doing a run. Just before the boss in the second level, there'll be another room where you can go in it, download the data from the shell, and then next time you'll be able to play as the Engineer. So definitely do not enter the boss room before doing this so that you can then get the Engineer. Then finally, there's the Juggernaut. And this one is my personal favorite alongside the Hunter. He is the hardest shell to obtain and is also the slowest. But with the right usage of implants on top of upgrades for the shell, the dude is a powerhouse. He can punch across the arena while devastating whatever makes contact with the punch. And it's not something that I would want to get hit with, honestly. Then there's the Stray Redirector ability, which absorbs damage and disperses energy, which can mark enemies and damage them on secondary use or set time. To unlock the Juggernaut class, you have to reach the final level and then go into a room with the unknown file icon, complete that room, and then download the data, which will then unlock you the shell for the Juggernaut. But when you do get to the 4th level, make sure that you pick the room with the Juggernaut data first. With enough runs and token and XP farming, which you use for upgrades, you'll eventually be able to upgrade all of the shells on top of all of the other existing upgrades to make said runs more manageable. During your runs, you'll also sometimes run into NPCs that offer services come with a monkey's paw touch to it. One can have you spend XP to gamble on a potential item, but it can also usually lead to getting nothing, so do this at your own risk, especially if you want to save that XP. Then there is a guy who can provide the services of upgrading or giving you a random implant, but it will cost you tokens, so think about it before using them. Then there is a doctor who can give you some pretty good implants, but they come with significant debuffs that can really screw you over if bought at the wrong time. These debuffs can last several areas, but eventually they'll either dissipate after a couple of areas, or you'll meet an NPC that can negate the debuffs, so that you can benefit from the implant without any further burdens. At the shop, you'll get a chance to get some health back, buy more slots for your implants, or get another item that may help you during your run. Even for a relatively short game, it certainly has a lot of replayability when you factor in the gameplay variety between the 4 shells, the combination of mods for your primary and secondary weapons, on top of the implants, that can also snowball alongside other things that make up a number of different builds when synergized together, where even if you synergize the mods and the implants, all in succession, you will still see some considerable damage and chain reactions going along. The game just becomes this dance that you can't get enough of once you're hooked into it, and there's tons of weapon and movement tech that can be discovered and practiced with, just like what people did with Doom Eternal, and what people are doing now with Doom the Dark Ages. The gunplay and the movement together makes you fly free like a butterfly with precise inputs, and responds with gratifying execution when you fuse different abilities together, alongside using your weapons at the same time. Deadlink is just a harmonious display of movement shooting that makes you use everything at your disposal without having the game ever asking you to do it. The conditions that are set upon the arena, as well as the mechanics that coincide with the conditions of the area, will naturally drive you to push for C-ball breaks, weapon swaps, grenade and ability usages, just so that you can survive the place. Whereas in a lot of other shooters, you can generally get by with using certain weapons or items and still win, without actively engaging with everything it has to offer. That's not the case with Deadlink though. You have to use everything, and I absolutely love the way this game does it. Deadlink, for its short length, still offers so much in return. It offers one of the most beautiful displays of stylized 3D I've ever seen in a first-person shooter. Everything just pops with the 3D techniques that go beyond just modeling. It's 3D that I feel is ageless. The art team went for something that not only looked unique from the rest, but one that would immortalize itself to the point where, on lower resolutions, the game wouldn't lose too much of its overall appeal. Games like Deadlink, A Short Hike, and Breath of the Wild have sold me on the idea of having more stylized 3D games. Take this game, for example, Out of Action. Its art style allows room for high poly looking models, all the while giving them a different shade that makes them look somewhat cartoony. Something not too far apart from what you would see in toon-shaded models or models with grease pencils and color ramps attached to them. While I'm still slowly learning art and 3D modeling, I can't help but think of another game that comes to mind as well, Reflex Arena. This was an arena shooter that I covered a long while ago now, but it is a severely underrated Quake-style shooter where its graphics and art style have a untextured approach to the environments, the weapons, as well as the models, while still being carefully constructed with its model design, with all the different colors being laid on them that gives them life still. Check Out of Action and Reflex Arena out if you want to explore different styles of 3D. Nevertheless, Deadlink is just a gorgeous game. I love the way this game looks overall, and I hope that the studio continues with this art direction for future projects. Outside of the simulation runs, you have Chrono Deck, which is like a time trial mode that emphasizes smart ability usage and fast movement. There's a leaderboard system alongside some medals to grind for as well, but honestly, I just don't really care that much for this mode. But in saying that, it's good that the game does offer an alternative mode that people can also enjoy. Then there is the Extant Existence mode, or just Endless mode, where you can fight off endless waves of enemies, bosses, all the while obtaining upgrades as you go along. This is a great mode for experimenting with different builds, all the while not risking a run that you could potentially run and screw up when things go wrong. You unlock this mode after reaching the 4th level, but after that you can then dive into it and enjoy a pick up and play version of Deadlink, where you can play for as long as you want. And that's all I have for Deadlink. I simply love this game. For its unique and elegant art style, its challenging but equally rewarding gameplay, the synth music that makes you feel like you're in a John Wick style gunfight or something, and its smart application of making the player naturally engage with all of the mechanics and items at once. I haven't really paid that much attention to the story, nor have I read through the codex material, but there is plenty of it to sink your teeth into if you're interested in it. But personally, I don't really care that much, if I'm being honest. I don't really go into these kind of games usually to talk. They're the kind of games where the only thing left walking out of the room is me. And Deadlink gives you that kind of experience if you're not really in it for the story, but all for the gameplay. And it does it with style. That, again, I would even compare to games like Ultrakill and Doom Eternal that I hold in such high regard. Games that give you a whole new experience when explored holistically. If you're looking for a fun roguelite that is also an FPS, then buy the 9. Play this game first. Please. It's still awesome and it is still gorgeous. I generally don't talk about games that I think are shit, which means that if I am talking about the game this much like it's an Elder Scroll in front of me, then you know that it's a good one. If you want more Doom Eternal but with a cyberpunk-like aesthetic and don't mind the roguelite aspect, then play Deadlink. Stay safe everyone, and thanks for watching.